Hi, this is Michael Azarad, Editor-in-Chief of the Talkhouse, and welcome to the Talkhouse Music Podcast. This episode of the Talkhouse Music Podcast features Stuart David, founding bassist with the beloved Scottish band Belle and Sebastian. He's also a member of the delightful Looper, whose latest album Off Grid Offline came out this April. He spoke with James Fearnley, who is the founding accordionist with the iconic band the Pogues, who memorably fused Irish folk music and punk rock, and maybe had a few drinks along the way. Both David and Fearnley have written books about their experiences playing in famous rock bands. Stuart David's book is In the All-Night Café, a memoir of Belle and Sebastian's formative year. Fearnley's book is called Here Comes Everybody, which our more refined listeners will note is a reference to James Joyce, and that's the story of the Pogues. Stuart spoke from his home in Scotland, and James from his home in Los Angeles. They're two kind of different people, and yet you can hear them find plenty of common ground as they told some tales about their respective bands and talked about the sometimes thorny subject of writing a book about your own band. Here we go.
In a sense, my first autobiographical foray into telling the Pogue story was actually doing it by means of writing a song about it. Tell me how your autobiographical first foray started.
Well, I think when I was in Belle and Sebastian, just the first year of the band, we didn't do any interviews, and at that time I wrote a small kind of autobiography about the band called Ink Polaroids, which were really just imaginary photographs and descriptions of what was happening. And then after
as
that,
if you were being followed, as if you had interest from the outside. Yeah,
and then I did another one. Our first New York trip, I kind of transcribed all the conversations as they were happening and pretended that was Ink movies. So I had been doing autobiographical writing about Belle and Sebastian right from the start, really. Mainly because we had...
So, wait a minute. Yeah. So can I get this clear? So as people are saying things, you're writing it down?
I was, yeah. I would maybe try and wait until, a couple of minutes after the conversation had ended and do it a bit based on memory. But it was really quite in the moment of it happening, so that I wouldn't forget anything.
That's really uncanny because I think your approach is maybe sounds slightly different. It sounds a lot more artistic, actually, than mine. Because I want, I've been writing diary and stuff. And I could easily say that that your process is like it's just diary. Yeah. But if you're writing stuff down as it happens, then in a sense you're contributing your. Well, I was going to say contributing your lack of contribution to a conversation. If all you're doing is writing it down as it happens, then it's sort of. To begin with, I thought that perhaps you weren't saying anything at all and you were letting other people talk while you wrote it all down. But you must have put in your own voice and then waited till that conversation had finished and then you'd write down what you remembered of it like seconds later.
Yeah, it was like that, really. So my own dialogue would be in the conversation most of the time as well.
Yeah. Because I used to oftentimes go off to the hotel room at the end of the day and write about what had happened. Right. I was going to say right the way through the first sort of iteration of the Pogues. So it wasn't right the way through, but it just now I don't know if this happens because I think writing diary might alter one's actual memory of what happened, because just because of the fact that you wrote about it, seems to sort of bathe what you are writing, what you did write about, in a sort of light that wouldn't have been there had you not written about it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. And would you...
yeah.
Would you think when the thing was happening, I'm going to write about this later, or would you just wait?
Oh, well, I think it's a bit of both, because I tried to get into. I found the whole thing of going off on tour, not the whole thing, the romantic side of me on tour, wanted to take it all in, like a lake near Forfar, as I remember, one that was just looked beautiful, or the site of. Are you familiar with Shap Fell as you go up the M6 on the way from, let's say, Manchester up to Glasgow? You go through the western side of the Yorkshire Dales, and there's a sort of section up there.
Yeah.
Where these sort of round, it's really beautiful. Or indeed, a ferry trip from, I think it was, I can't remember the name of the town now, in between, balls. One of those Scandinavian countries, but there's like some pink rock, and this ferry kind of swerved in between all these rocks from, I think, probably from Finland to Sweden, maybe, or from Sweden to Denmark, or something like that. And sometimes I just thought, well, I've got to get that down.
Yeah.
Other times it was a matter of, I've just got to get something down, because I've decided to be the diarist, and I've got to do this every day. So it was a bit of both, really. And I used to write stuff down as it happened too, but in a little notebook that I kept with me. That when somebody says something really stupid, or something revelatory, or weird, or that I thought, oh, I'm not going to hear that again. I'd write it down. In fact, Terry Woods, our multi-instrument, well, it wasn't a multi-instrumentalist, but our sort of lead guitarist, I suppose, except he played a bouzouki cittern thing. He was a bit older than us. He came up to me and said, "James, I hope you understand there are some things that are said that are not intended to be written down." So I felt a little bit chastened, not too much. I just kept doing it. So
when it came to writing the book, you had all that, because when I came to actually write my book about Belle and Sebastian, I had nothing apart from these early books that I'd written, but they didn't really cover the period I was doing. So I had to rely almost entirely on memory. And I really wished that I had kept diaries and things like that. I had some old letters.
Well, that's weird, because you kind of sort of had, though, but because those were already published, that you felt like you couldn't go into that material, and so you had to do something different, basically.
Yeah, it was really whatever memories were just kind of bright and seemed just that recurred over the years. I kind of tried to just make a structure out of those ones, and then later found out that a lot of them were false memories, or
I came across that.
Things like I described a party, and it turned out it was two separate parties that I had conflated into one that I found out afterwards. So it's quite strange doing it that way.
Yeah, it comes with the job, I think. It shouldn't come with the job of writing, but it comes with the job of being a musician, I think.
Yeah.
Or it just comes with the job of being like human,
Yeah.
Because there was what I did. Well, no, actually, there's a girl in my book, a girlfriend that I meet in New York, and when I think I sent her a copy of it. but once she'd read it, she said, "Oh, that night isn't the way that we met at all." But that's fine because like people just remember things the way they fucking want to.
Yeah.
So she was cool. She was cool with it, entirely cool, because I think I had. Well, I don't know, I suppose I had most of it right, and she could be lenient.
Yeah. Did you have any bad reactions from anyone who just didn't like what you'd written about them, or just didn't like being in print at all?
The latter. I don't think anybody who is in a group and doing, you know. Well, wait a minute. I think just the fact of being in print, I don't think that bothered anybody. But there was. But what I did was that once I'd finished the typescript, I'd had the meeting with the editor at Faber and Faber, a guy called Lee Brackstone, who's from Yorkshire, and I like Yorkshire people generally. I've met some shits before, but mostly they're nice. His only note to me about the book was, James, if you can take the bits out of it that make you look like a knobhead, we'll have a good book. So that was the only note he gave me. So I just went through the whole. The manuscript was far too long. Not far too long. It was maybe about 4,000-5,000 words too long. Right. So I went through it, taking all the bits out of it that made me look like a knobhead, and then submitted that draft, and they seemed happy enough with it. So that then became the typescript. So after a tour that we'd done it would be 2008, 2009 or something, maybe 2010. We just finished in Germany. We had a gig in London that we did. And what I did in my hotel room in London was to wrap all these typescripts up in brown paper and tie them up with string. And it didn't occur to me that that's the song from Sound of Music. These are a few of my favourite things. I didn't get it. I don't know if it was subconscious or just irrelevant actually as well. Anyway, so I went round each member of the band individually afterwards, and I handed them a copy of the typescript. If I could find them by themselves, because I didn't want to hand the typescript to Shane McGowan in front of anybody else, because it would have just sort of got all messy. Anyway, so Shane took hold of the typescript and sort of weighed it in his hands, and he said, "It's not very big, is it?" So I said, "Well, it's typed on two sides of the paper. That's why it would have been twice the weight if I'd just done it on one side." But then I had to. I couldn't get Spider, the whistle player, alone backstage at this gig that we did. So I'd arranged to meet with him and his wife to go have dinner in London before I came back to Los Angeles, and I didn't hear from them all day, and I kept texting them saying, "I'm coming up to your house. I presume we're still going out to dinner, but I'm on the bus." And then I found myself outside their back door of their flat in Finsbury Park. And I thought, nobody answered the door, so I'd started to write a note and was going to leave it on their doorstep and then just bugger off. When the door opened and Spider's wife opened the door as I was walking back down their pathway, and she said, "What have you done?" And so we had to, because Shane and his girlfriend and Spider and his wife had been on the phone all day about the stuff that I'd written. Oh, and another thing. Oh, and there's this. Oh, did you read the bit where? And all that sort of stuff. So it was a bit difficult.
Yeah.
But you just have to sit there and say, "Yeah, all right, I wrote a fucking book, and I wasn't nasty about anybody. If I was nasty about anybody, it was probably me."
Yeah.
I would say. So tell me about what's your experience with
nobody nobody's read mine yet, and
all right. You didn't give them copies in advance.
No, I decided not to. The thing I got
that's
back,
ballsy. All right.
the thing I got back from the publisher said you could be sued by 10 people, some of them more than once. So I think there were 30 potential lawsuits.
Bloody hell! All
two
right.
of two of them from my wife. So.
Oh, but then I was going to say, well, you can discount those, maybe you can't. I don't know. It depends what kind of relationship you have with your wife.
Yeah. So I've taken. I think most of that stuff has been fixed. Some of it they couldn't be sure about. So I know that I can't be sued by most people in the band.
Yeah.
But there's a lot. Mine is it's based a lot on the whole kind of community that we were part of when we formed the band. So there's a lot more people in it as main characters who aren't actually part of the band. So I'm quite worried about how they'll feel about being in kind of in the public eye when they haven't chosen to be. So
you didn't change names?
No, I kept all the real names.
That's extra ballsy. That's extra ballsy as well. Did you ever get beaten up as a kid?
Well, I've certainly fought a lot as a kid, but I haven't fought all that much as an adult, so I don't know what kind of shape I'm in.
I'm sure there are gyms in Ayrshire somewhere. I'd start training.
Yeah. You never really know, because there's some people you'll say something about that you think could be they'd be unhappy about, and they're quite pleased just to be in print, and then other people where you think that's just quite an affectionate thing or something, and they'll just be really angry about it. So I've got all that to come.
Let me ask you a question. Of your community that the band came out of or emerged within, are you still? You live in the same country as them. In the same neighbourhood. I got out.
A lot of them were Irish. I shared a flat with a lot of Irish people in Glasgow, and a lot of them have since moved back to Ireland. So I might be okay.
Yeah.
Might be okay on that front, but a lot of them are still in the same country.
I understand that the defamation laws in Ireland are a lot more relaxed than they are in not relaxed, rigid than they are in England, and in England even more rigid than in the United States. Well, I was just wondering to what extent that you still knew those people or kept in touch with them, whether they were the ones who went back to Ireland or the ones that stayed in and around Clydebank, and or even the band members that you wrote about. How many of all them lot are you still in touch with?
Yeah, I suppose probably the majority of them I'm still in touch with. All the band I'm still in touch with. We usually go to the Christmas dinner that Belle and Sebastian have. But there
the
are
Belle and Sebastian Christmas dinner sounds adorable. Or is it messy?
Well, I always want to try and start a rumour that I got drunk at it and beat up the bass player who took over from me after I left. But it hasn't really happened.
Okay, you mean like the circumstances of a Belle and Sebastian Christmas dinner would tolerate a rumour that you beat up the bass player at it, and then they say, "Well, I remember something funny going on. Was that what it was?"
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to go to one of those.
Yeah, they are. They're quite. So there were people. Me and Stuart were in a couple of bands before Belle and Sebastian, and some of the people that we were in those bands with, I'm not in touch with at all now. And there's things about them in the book that I don't know how it will be for them. I was hoping just to give them their kind of their dues for the part they played in the formation of the band, but you can never really be sure if people want that publicity or not.
So is it a matter of whether or not you think that they can tolerate the publicity, or were there sections or sentences or bits where you thought, oh bollocks, I'm just going to say this anyway?
There were in my draft, but working with the editor, I had so many edits: copy edit, legal edit, and final edit, that I had a lot of guidance from people: reword this bit because it could be offensive even if it's not libelous or whatever. So I did mostly take that advice because in an attempt not to offend anybody.
That sort of begs the question, however, when it came to writing it, regardless of what the finished product is, then I suppose, I don't know, it sort of begs a really big question, which is, why write the book? What did you want people to know?
Yeah.
So then obviously you must have had a thing in you. Well, I don't know, maybe you didn't. Why write the book?
Yeah, that was quite an easy question.
And yeah, go on.
Because when we started Belle and Sebastian, there was a policy for the first 2 years that we didn't do any press interviews after we were well known. So the whole story of how the band formed was never actually told. That's usually what you would have got asked in those interviews. So I just kind of felt there was an interesting untold story there, coupled with the thing
hence the title of your book as well.
Yeah, there's just a myth about Belle and Sebastian forming in an all-night cafe in a single day. And sort of, I don't really like rock and roll mythology. For the kind of band Belle and Sebastian are, I don't think there should be a myth like that around them. I really wanted to tell the story of how the band really came about, and it was a much longer, more accidental process than in the myth.
I can imagine that you might have thought, oh well, I've laid the groundwork for an autobiography in retrospect by not doing interview. But I think regardless whether you whether you did interviews or you didn't do interviews, that mythologies build up around anybody's damn band. Like, with us, I can only talk about us, really, or the extent to which I already know that myths about, I don't know, like any band I choose to throw a stick at, like Rolling Stones or Queen or Slade or anybody, because of the information that you've got. There's a myth that they're just the way that you present yourselves. And this became an issue with us right at the very start, to do with the drink. Yeah. Because the myths come from the prejudices that people have. I'm not going to get onto a soapbox here, but these things can get really charged sometimes. The assumption was that we were all Irish. From my accent, you can tell that I'm not. There's an assumption that because you're Irish, that you're either stupid or you just drink all the time, or both. Yeah. Or that you work or that you worked in building sites and or dug canals, and so people sort of wrap all the assumptions that you make about the Irish, let's say in this particular case, and then Shane. But yeah, there was a lot of drinking that went on, like a huge amount of drinking. Yeah. But we didn't drink because anybody was Irish. We just drank because we were in a rock and roll band. Like, throw a stick at a rock and roll band and the chances are you're going to hit somebody who's at least had a Pernod.
Would you say that's the main reason you wanted to do the book, was to address those myths?
No, not
No?
at all. No, I didn't. It's funny because I never even thought about that. I
Yeah.
didn't want to address any myths. I wanted, the reason why I wrote the book is because I always said that I would.
Yeah.
And I believed people when they said, "Oh, if anybody was going to write the book about the Pogues, it should be you," because I was scribbling away all the time.
Yeah.
I never stopped. And I think it must have bugged the bejesus out of the rest of the band to come down to breakfast in a hotel. We had hotels, by the way. We had lots of them, and they were very nice. We had a role manager and an agent who actually made sure there were hotel rooms for us there. I don't think we ever didn't stay in a hotel.
Right.
By choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't mean to show off or anything. And I forget where I was even. Yeah, so to come to breakfast and there's James with his bloody diary, and he's scribbling away in tiny little handwriting so that nobody could read it. Yeah, I just, and then I suppose the second major reason why I wrote it was just I've it sounds like I'm trying to be funny or something, but I still like the sound of my own voice. I mean, I was fairly quiet to all intents and purposes, as the sort of the quiet one in the Pogues, because as far as interviews were concerned, I didn't know how to do them, and I didn't know how to be funny, and I didn't know how to wrap things up nicely, and I didn't know how to give sound bites or anything. Not that those were particularly demanded or anything. It's just I thought that they were, because what I'd read in magazines looked like, oh wow, yeah, you need to have things to say to these people.
Yeah.
I didn't realise until after the book came out that you could just run at the mouth and it's fine.
So essentially, did you work on the book really for, what would that be, like 25 years between starts?
Yeah,
Would you start
I suppose.
the first? When would you start the first diary? Would that be mid-80s, something like that?
It was funny because I started properly writing diary the year before the Pogues started, so that would be
Right.
1981. I think it was in October 1981 I started.
Yeah.
I started doing that, but most of it was to do with a girlfriend that I had at the time, who the relationship with whom overlapped into the Pogues by about maybe 4 years. So a lot of the material in the diaries, and that was difficult to read when I went through them all again, because I went through them all to see what there was. And most of it is just sort of hand-wringing agony and trying to figure myself out in a relationship, and how diaries are, presumably.
Yeah.
They're not easy to read again.
No.
And then every now and again, it's sort of, another rehearsal with the Pogues, and then that's all there was. But it wasn't until the Pogues sort of started kicking off that the whole, I don't know. I think the whole romance of it, for me, getting into a minivan and travelling the length and breadth of the country, and then going to Ireland for the first time, was big. So I wanted to write all about that: the gorse bushes and the swans and the reeds and the drink and the peat and the all that sort of stuff. I got a big thrill out of doing that. And then the mad way that we used to tour back then, by way of a bus to Harwich, and then a ferry to Hamburg, and then another minivan from Hamburg to Lubeck, and then Lubeck to Helsinki across the Baltic Sea, and then then over the glaciers into Bergen and Oslo.
Yeah.
It was, it was hard to do, and there was some mad things that happened. But just the sea travel, and the bus travel, and the mountains, and things. I think it's so different now, and I sound like an old man of the sea or something like that.
I was thinking about the comparison just today of how an older generation, a lot of them would write memoirs about their experiences during the war, and with us it's writing experiences about having travelled in bands. I think there is an equivalent there of it was the way you saw the world for people of our age, whereas for an older generation the way you saw the world was travelling as part of the Navy or part of the Army, something like that.
Yeah, sure. But with the most notable missing ingredient being that people tend not to want to shoot at you and kill you. So
that is the advantage.
Except, well, yeah, no, indeed. But except we have. I remember leaving a gig in Detroit once where I don't know what they wanted or what they didn't want, but they were sort of pelting a van with bottles. They didn't smash any windows as I remember, but it was really scary for a minute. I don't know what point they were trying to make. So we have had things thrown at us from time to time. How frantic were Belle and Sebastian's adherents?
Definitely, I was very different from a Pogues audience.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah,
it's more the intensity that frightened me sometimes. A kind of obsessional intensity of people jumping up on stage and just grabbing you and not letting go. But on the whole, a very, very well behaved, quiet, sober crowd.
I'd imagine they would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd get like the odd stage invasion, or would that be like an individual stage invasion? Just like one person would get up and grab hold of you.
Yeah, and in those days it was just one. I think Belle and Sebastian kind of encourage a sort of mass stage invasion during the show now, but in those days it would just be one mad stalker who would try and wrestle you to the floor or something like that, or chase you down the street.
Because they loved you so much.
Yeah. I was chased in London and Ontario in Canada by somebody for almost a mile who wanted to give me a pen. Just take this pen.
And you didn't want the pen so badly that you were prepared to run for a mile away from it.
Yeah.
Well, how big was the pen?
I broke a blade and I used some cranes. Look at me up a tree again to draw a heart around our names. Look at me up a tree again, and as they fall, you hear me out call. Look at me up a tree again.
But you were talking about going to your college and being on Social Security.
Yeah.
Which is where the Pogues came from as well. And I think if you went to like loads of people, in England, they were what's the word? Maintained by the state for a long time, even though it was a struggle a lot of the time.
There's a big discussion here now. I don't know if it's I don't know if it'd be happening over there, but just about how much it's only kind of privately educated people that are forming bands now because they're the only people who can afford to do the sort of long unpaid apprenticeship, and just the vilification of people who sign on in Britain now is really bad. I think it's just
Yeah.
They're
Now,
they've become the scapegoats.
So that's like palpable.
It's very palpable just now. Yeah, it's kind of coming to a head, I think, in the media and stuff. Just a real vilification of the unemployed. We have a lot of sort of reality programs, just where they're treated as entertainment to laugh at people who are unemployed, and I think it's a real loss for the culture because, like you say, that's where most of the good music from the 80s and the 90s came from. It was people who had been sustained by income support and social security and stuff like that.
We all thought that, the Thatcher years, you couldn't get any worse than that.
Yeah,
but you're saying it's worse.
I'd say it's worse than the Thatcher years for benefits and for just kids trying to get a start. I don't think the unemployment numbers are quite as high, maybe 2.5 million. I think it was it 3 million and over in the Thatcher years, but I think it's just because you can't sign on now, so you don't have the numbers anymore.
Right, yeah.
So the kids they're all just doing training courses and stuff to keep the numbers down, so you can't really tell what the real number is, but I'd definitely say it's comparable to the Thatcher years again. For the young anyway, it's probably not as bad as it was for the when a lot of the industry closed down in the Thatcher years for middle-aged workers losing their jobs, but the young and the disabled and the probably any kind of mental illness has been hit really hard by the reforms on it.
What's the point in being a musician now anymore? If unless your parents can put you through private school and pay for everything, because no one else is going to bloody pay you for making music nowadays.
No, it changed so suddenly. And we were right at the end of it. I think the year we put out our first Looper album was the year Kaza came out. It was Napster, I think, just the year of Napster.
All right, yeah.
We thought we were a much smaller band than we were because we were judging it on record sales, and then you'd go and do a show and there'd be hundreds of people
Masses of people there, one sort of wondered for a time where because with the reunion thing, it's it's been really money-wise. It's been really useful because people want to see. It seems like there was some sort of there was some balance was trying to be redressed, or something. If we're gonna steal all your music, here we could say sorry by turning up in droves to your gigs.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't think it works like that, but that's just the way that it seemed.
Yeah.
We're sorry, but here we are with our tickets. We'll come and see you live.
Yeah, I had emails from people telling me that I've stolen your album, but don't worry, I'll pay for it.
No, don't worry, I'll buy a T-shirt or a mug.
Yeah.
So that there's a friend of mine who's a record producer here in Los Angeles, and somebody said to him the other day, you're a mug. You're in this. If you've got a family, you want to look after your family, and you want to repair the roof on your house, or you want to repair your car, or university for your kids. Get out the business that you're in, because you're not gonna be able to do that the way that with what you're doing now. It's just foolish.
Yeah.
Get out and make some money somewhere where there's money to be made. So all right. So if all the musicians, record producers, people, like us, if we all chose to do that, well then what do you listen to?
Yeah, it does seem that you have to.
It's like a weird sort of, I can see Charlton Heston in the film version of this, wandering the streets of some sort of post-apocalyptic 1970s sort of towns, crying out, "Where's the music?"
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah, it seems that it'll just have to go back to like poetry in the 18th, 19th century when it was Byron or whatever, and you had to be an aristocrat to write poetry.
Yeah, I was going back further than that, actually. I thought you would have to go back to the days where you just beat a couple of rocks together.
Yeah.
So all right then. So why did you wait?
Well, I think in a way when I read that question, I thought, well, in a way I didn't wait because I wrote those 2 books when I was in the band, so I don't really think
Of course.
waiting was why it's now that I've written the book.
Yeah.
I wasn't well for a period with a kind of chronic fatigue thing for a few years, and I couldn't go out much, and
Yeah.
I needed something to do, and I think that was sort of the starting point for why
Right.
I wrote it at that particular time.
On your little tray table in your yeah.
But I think you just get to a certain age as well where your youth seems quite bright, but you're forgetting it, and you want to write, because I didn't have diaries or anything, you want to write it down before you forget it. And I think because I'd written novels, I sort of thought of this just as a memoir of my youth, but something quite unusual happened in my youth compared to most writers wouldn't usually have that experience. So I think it was just much more to do with getting to a certain age rather than to do with having left the band and not being not being part of that anymore.
I dreamt I had to go to Mars. I'm always kidding on about going to Mars through the day, but faced with the reality of it in a dream, I was terrified. And it wasn't going to be like a moon trip. There was 3 of us going, but we couldn't all go in the same ship. We had to go one at a time, or a day between us. I had to go first, and it was the thought of passing through all that black space, all the darkness with nothing in it, and then being the first one to land there all alone. I knew it was supposed to...
Did you do the book tour thing ever?
I have done it in the past with novels, but we always tried to do it with the band as a sort of media presentation rather than reading in public. Because I do quite a few...
So what does that mean? I don't get that. What do you mean?
Well, I do quite a few spoken word songs with the band that aren't actually sung. Of course, I've heard a few of them. Yeah. So I tried to incorporate the book into that kind of format rather than just reading it. But with this book...
And why did you do that?
It kind of reminded, if I had to stand up and read it, kind of reminded me of having to stand up and read in the class when in school, when people would throw things at you, and it just, I've got a few events coming up for this book, and they're the first ones I'll have done without the band. So
damn, that's
Did you do a tour?
Yeah, I did. When the English edition came out in 2000 and whenever that was, 12.
Yeah,
I think it was 2012. I went off to go and do the LAN weekend. It was the first, I think, basically the first thing that I did. And then I read in a prison in Wales, which was amazing, to have like people, come out to hear somebody come and read. And they've not come basically to come and hear you read. They've come to get out of that fucking cell is what they've done. And they're not interested in you at all. It's just like, thank God to be out of that room. Yeah. Which was interesting because it's like, fine, I if I'm providing you the wherewithal to get out yourself for an hour, then I've done my job. I could have just read gobbledygook to these guys, and it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
And then to a literary festival and stuff. The bookstore things didn't work out quite so well, except up in Leeds, I think. But then this time around in the States, I went from started out in Los Angeles, then I went to New York and did a couple there. And then I went to England for a family wedding. This was last year. Then back to do Boston and Chicago, and then back to Los Angeles and up the West Coast, Portland and San Francisco and Berkeley and places like that. And I had a fantastic time doing that, because they were like proper bookstores. And it was when you said about how it reminded you of your experience reading stuff out in the front of class.
Yeah.
And having things thrown at you, that you wanted to use music as a kind of, shield.
Yeah.
Maybe, or at least they had some other targets to throw things at, or without it just being you. But with me, my experience of that was because my dad enjoyed dominating a room. No, he did. Whether it's the dining room or the Rotary Club luncheons or whatever. He got himself into a terrible, nervous state about it, but it's something that he was just driven. I think he was fairly sort of driven to do it.
Yeah.
And to stand up in front of a load of people and talk off the top of your head about something for a bit, and then read out of a book that has, in large part, come off the top of your head as well. I found a great sort of connection with my dad, to be frank, actually.
Yes, you had a kind of role model for it. I think that's my difficulty.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody to base it on. I haven't really seen any readings that I've thought, that's really good, I should do it like that.
Yeah.
But having a role model like that must help, I think.
Yeah, it did, and the occasions for thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm contributing the way that my dad always wanted me to contribute.
Yeah.
I mean, which I have in any case, I can't say that the Pogues wasn't a contribution to something, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
but this is like my own individual contribution to something. I mean, it sounds on one hand, it sounds really stupid and my God, am I really thinking that? But I actually did think it. I thought, oh great,
Yeah.
here I am, I'm reading out a book, people are listening, and I've finished something.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. When it comes to your book tour, well, where are you going to do it? Because if the book's coming out in the States, are you coming to the States?
There's no plans at the moment to do that because I'm still not all that well, energy-wise.
Well, I'm sorry.
And stuff. So I haven't really been out of the country for maybe must be 15 years or something like that.
Balls. Yeah.
But really haven't been travelling much away from home for the last 5 years or something, just with this fatigue thing. But I'd like to.
Sounds like a. Yeah.
But I always had a really good audience in America, and I think I would do it maybe with an acoustic guitar and just turn it into, structure it a bit as a spoken word song, maybe some passages rather than than just reading straight from the book.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing with because I met some musician guys in New York. So I asked them, "Do you fancy just doing a song at the beginning and a song at the end?"
Yeah.
So I did a song at the beginning, and then I read all my stuff, and then the band had joined me to do so it's like a acoustic, obviously, with another accordion player, because I found it difficult to sing and play the accordion at the same time.
Right.
As you can imagine, it's a very complicated instrument to master.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so joking, because I don't play all of it. I don't play the left hand bit at all. I've got away with it. I was playing half of an instrument for 30 years. It's amazing. It's amazing how you can bamboozle people.
Yeah.
But that sounds interesting, to do the guitar thing and intersperse. I'd go for that.
Yeah, 'cause we did a thing once when I had a novel at one point, and we went out and did the readings as if we were the characters from the book. And people, and we started this kind of fiction that I had stolen the book from this character, and just written down his story and not given him a credit. And we pulled it off, and people who had come to the event sent me emails telling me I was a lazy bastard for not turning up, and that they'd come all the way from out of town to see me, and I hadn't been there.
With your book tour and stuff. But you don't know if you're going to. You don't know if you can even commit to one.
No, I've not been able to commit to anything except individual events just in Glasgow and Edinburgh at the moment. That's kind of as far as I can travel.
Right.
Getting better all the time, so I'm hoping to be able to do more.
Yeah.
By the time the book is coming out.
I mean, outside the boundaries of a podcast, I'd ask you what's the matter with you, but you don't have to answer that question at all. So don't.
In a lot of ways, I don't know. It's one of these undiagnosed modern illnesses that they either call chronic fatigue or ME or something like that, just where you feel like you've got the flu essentially all the time.
That's right, yeah. Well, that's that. What else can you be but a writer, I suppose?
Yeah, it is. You're kind of forced into it, really.
It's like, I'm just trying to think who it is like. I was going to say Franz Kafka, but he seemed to be fine. Well, he wasn't. He wasn't at all. Who am I thinking of? Like some the sickly ones. Jean-Paul Sartre, apparently.
Yeah, certainly. Is it Christy Brown, the Irish poet from My Left Foot?
Yeah. Of course.
Essentially just left. It's not all bad, really. I mean, in some ways, it's good to have limitations on what you can do, because then you're not spoiled for choice, really, and you just settle down.
Oh, that's so bloody. If an American heard you say that, you're so from a country where association football works. Because it's deferred. What do they call it? Deferred gratification.
Yeah.
It just comes from the culture. Like I know what the culture that it comes from. That's why they don't get it in the States. They don't understand association football.
You hear people complaining here all the time about too much choice in the supermarkets, too many shampoos.
Yeah.
It's becoming a big thing.
It's fucking true. Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand the too much choice thing, because I've been living with that in that culture for how long? 90 for 22 years. I've been here for 22 years. Yeah, right. You can tell by the accent. I know. I've made so made sure to stick to that. And when it came to proofreading and doing all the copy editing and stuff for the book, I worked with one of the guys at Faber and Faber, and because I wanted to expunge anything that would even sort of have a little sort of smell of America about the language, punctuation, spelling, the whole lot, to the point that I did the universal search for words like synchronize, because I'd been spelling it with a Z.
Yeah.
And I just changed all of those to ISE. And then I had to go through it to make sure I hadn't missed anything, like if it had recognised a word that, you know. Do you know what I mean? I was so careful to do that.
Yeah,
and the distinction between the word toward and towards, that toward is apparently an American, whatever they call it, and the word towards you would use in England. So I went through and got rid of all the, I put an S on the word toward all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had the opposite. I think because I'm quite influenced by a lot of American writers, I had the experience of the English editors taking out my Americanisms and telling me that's not the way we do it here.
Oh, that's so interesting. Can you give me an example?
I think the Z thing was probably the most common thing. Just any words like realise or things like that. I would always just think it was a Z and not realise that's not the way you spell it here.
Wow. That sounds like something that, it feels like that would be something that you would have known.
Yeah, it's just completely have no consciousness of it actually living here. I think American culture has become so prevalent here.
Yeah.
Whereas you'll maybe have more of a remove from it as an observer. It's just kind of seeped in to where I don't realise these are Americanisms.
That's so interesting because, like, here I am, living here for 22 years. I have done everything I possibly can to keep my accent. Obviously, some vocabulary is going to come in and sort of, lay that to waste to some degree. And then to spend all that effort making sure that in the copy editing of the book that I get rid of anything that's going to and then that's really, really fascinating that you should say that it's seeped in and you can't tell where me living here where it's seeping out from. I've made it my job to be able to tell.
Yeah, and I would say even your accent, a lot of young people here, teenagers, you notice them going through a stage now where they have an American accent and they don't realise it's an American accent. So you've probably got less of an American accent than a lot of people living in England now, even though you've been over there for so long.
That's such a giveaway. You're from America. You're from America. I can tell because your English accent is like dint proof. Oh God, thanks a lot. All right. I'm going to go to another country entirely now, and I'm going to see what happens there. Like I don't know. Russia. Let's see what that's like.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Yes.
We should probably wind that up now. Should we have covered all these questions?
We've covered all those things. And then the last American accent that I heard this afternoon said, "Oh, we'll let you go for 3/4 of an hour." Does that mean they have to wait until they've got 3/4 of an hour of material that they can use?
I've got a good 20 minutes of material, guys. Maybe 22.
I should say you've got. I'm 22. Fine. Well, you're going to have to fill it in with bits because Stuart's got to go to his bed. Stuart, lovely talking to you, and maybe we'll get a chance to meet at some point, and all the best with your strange 21st century disease. And I hope you come out of it.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I've always been a huge Pogues fan, so it was great to talk to you.
Well, Jimmy White, our manager in the pub where I was born. He played it from the night time to the peaceful early morn. He soothed the souls of psychos and the men who had the horn. And they all looked very happy in the morning.
That's it for this episode of the Talkhouse Music Podcast. I'm Michael Azarad, Editor-in-Chief of the Talkhouse. Thanks to our producer-engineer, Elia Einhorn.
Yeah, get it.
For more Talkhouse Music podcasts, and for lots of great writing about music by some excellent musicians, by all means visit thetalkhouse.com/music.